Greetings folks and welcome to the Electromaker show. This is your roundup of all things maker and embedded and lovely. And we've had a little bit of a gap between shows, but you've probably noticed if you follow our YouTube channel, that is because we were at Electronica and put out a bunch of videos from that trade fair. There were some really interesting ones and some real surprises. I didn't realize until we were there that Arduino were going to be launching their single pair Ethernet shield, and Marcello very graciously gave us an interview. It's just one of many things that happened in the moment that was nice. Of course, following that, I had the always present post-conference lurgy and had a bit of a cold, hence no show last week, but my voice seems to be back and I have a bunch of really exciting things to share with you today. Mechanical dials with e-ink displays being one of them. The Pi Pico 2W is out now. That's probably the biggest story of the week. We have a new product of the week as well in the form of the Seedstudio round display, and Particle, who we talked to a little while ago, we talked to Zach, their CEO, are having a winter sale. All of that plus more in this week's show, so I suppose we should get on with it. Now, I think it's safe to say we were all imagining the Raspberry Pi Pico 2W would show up sooner or later. I didn't realize it would be quite this soon, but here it is. It has arrived. And it looks, unsurprisingly, not dissimilar to the Raspberry Pi Pico W. It is retailing at $7, and if you're interested in finding out a little bit more about it, there is a blog post by Evan Upton here, which I will, of course, link in the description. But in short, it is the same Infineon module that you found on the Raspberry Pi Pico W, which gives you Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Some of you may be wondering why they haven't put their new RM2 module on the board. Presumably that's just simply down to costs. There's no need to put it on this particular board. The Raspberry Pi Pico W worked just fine with that module. And for those of you who may remember back when the Pico W first released, there was talk that, oh, Bluetooth isn't working with it and can never work with it. It was just one of those weird comments I saw in a couple of places. But yeah, that was purely a software issue that Raspberry Pi have solved ages ago, and you can now get started with the Pi Pico 2W. If you are interested in that RM2 module, that is something that Raspberry Pi will be selling separately, so you can integrate it into designs of your own, which use the RP2040 or the RP2350 in its various variations. That's something that is still available, but I believe that functionally, under the hood, it is essentially the same Infineon part, but with its own built-in module. It is a standalone module. Now, one other thing. I did immediately, even though I don't have one of these, I did just check to see what was going on with the Raspberry Pi Pico extension, because we talked about that quite recently. If you're not familiar or you missed that show, Raspberry Pi have put out their own Pico extension a little while ago, which makes it really easy to set up both MicroPython and C projects with VS Code. At least I think it's MicroPython. I'm saying that out loud, and I'm not sure if that's true. I've only used it to set up C projects. But yes, in short, if you have the extension and you open it, it is incredibly easy. If you say new project from example, the same way that you would probably start a lot of projects with a little bit of source code, you can select the Pico 2W already. One thing that has changed, I noticed, is that if you have the Pico 2 here, this is where you can select the architecture for the Pico 2. If you select Pico 2W, that disappears, but under the advanced options, you can decide which toolchain you want to use. So presumably that is how you would use the Pico 2W with RISC-V. It's not something that I have messed around with as yet. We'll probably report back on that because the RP2350 is a chip that I've fiddled with a little, but I do like it quite a lot, and it has become the sort of central chip I am targeting for my never-ending synthesizer project, which will probably outlive me. So I will be coming back to it and having a proper fiddle around with it at some point soon, and maybe try to make some kind of Electromaker video of that if anyone would be interested in seeing such a thing. But yes, if we did go back to saying, okay, we want the general stuff, in fact we don't need to see the advanced options, and let's just do the classic blink simple, and that's just it. You can do that and create a project, and it will create the project for you, download and install all the SDK stuff, and you're away with the races. Or perhaps I should have said away to the races. I think I'm mixing my sayings here. Anyway, if you would like to find out more, there is this fantastic blog post from Evan Upton who takes you through all of it. It also gives a little explanation, as I mentioned before, about the fact that the RM2 chip is something that you can use, just that it's not something that's going to be on this board. So it brings all the power of the RP2350 to these IoT projects. This modem from Infineon, the CYW43439, and it also mentions, yes, while our upcoming RM2 radio module already in use on this provides a route to scale for professional products. So more or less what I was saying, the modem that's on there is purpose fit for the Pico 2. It's already integrated into the board, but if you were going to be putting it into your own designs or professional products, that's when the RM2 will come in, which will be released to the public probably sooner than we expect, given what's happened with the Pi Pico 2W and the flurry of things that Raspberry Pi have been putting out in the last little while. And while we're talking about Raspberry Pi, I want a bit of a mea culpa moment here, because I was a little bit dismissive about the Raspberry Pi USB hub that they put out, because I said, well, it's just a USB hub. And then I actually ended up, while looking at other Raspberry Pi stuff to talk about in the show, reading the blog post about it, and to be perfectly honest, their reasoning for putting out their own hub is really solid. I'm just going to read you this short segment of it. It says, why design our own hub? Well, we'd become frustrated with the quality and price of the hubs available online. Either you pay a lot of money for a nicely designed and reliable product which works well with a broad range of hosts and peripherals, or you cheap out and get something much less compatible, or unreliable, or ugly, or all three. Sometimes you spend a lot of money and still get a lousy product. So yeah, this is not just a USB hub, this is the USB hub that Raspberry Pi wants you to have to work with your Raspberry Pi, and I feel like I was maybe a little bit too dismissive of it when it first came out. There's a reason why Raspberry Pi are putting out a whole bunch of their own peripherals and extras and things like that, and partially it's because, yes, they want you to buy more stuff from them, but at the end of the day, they want their ecosystem to work as well as possible, and so they're putting out a USB hub that they trust to work with the Raspberry Pi, and one of the main things about the Raspberry Pi is that the barrier of entry for using it is a lot easier than other products because there aren't as many gotchas. You get that support. The biggest argument for the longest time when Raspberry Pi were putting out single board computers and competitors were putting out similarly spec'd single board computers for less cost is that the support in the community has always been there for Raspberry Pi, and by extension I feel like that's what they're trying to do with all of this. There's going to be a universe coming very, very soon where ambulances run past the door very quick. This has been an interesting show, by the way. I hope that the sounds haven't been too crazy, because there's ambulances outside, and if you've heard rustling in the background, there's a hedgehog. There is literally a hedgehog here. We have a hedgehog that we found that's not hibernating. We're feeding it up so it can then hibernate, and it has been having the time of its life in a pile of leaves in a little hedgehog enclosure we've built over here. I'll put some video up of it in a moment. Yes, in the universe, quite soon, you'll be able to get a Raspberry Pi kit as a gift for someone who wants to get started with their own hobby computing, which will have literally everything in it they need to get started that will be designed to work straight out of the box without the same gotchas that have been talked about in this blog post. I just wanted to sort of mention that because I feel like, I was maybe a little bit dismissive of, USB hubs, ha! No, it's designed to be as good as the rest of the stuff. It is time to talk about our product of the week, which is the Seedstudio round display. And we will get onto it in a moment, but I was actually quite taken aback in a good way by this one, because I, like many people, assumed it was just a display and that's that. But it has a few nice features, which of course Robin will explain to you. But before we get onto that, it is time to announce the winner of our previous competition for the ESP32 S3 Box 3B, which is definitely a name, but which is a very cool all-in-one IoT kit with dual speakers. It's the kind of thing that could more or less replace a home assistant if you really want to do your own DIY idea of how it could work. It can do voice recognition and it can work with Home Assistant, which makes it a really good shoe-in. And it is time to announce the winner. And the winner is Gianpaolo Macciario, I may be pronouncing your name wrong, I apologize if that is the case, who said, if I win the Espressive ESP32 S3 Box 3B, I will use it together with Home Assistant to control a few gadgets I have in my house. Just a quick reminder, we choose the winners at random. It's a bit of a coincidence, but I suppose Home Assistant is a bit of an obvious choice of a thing that you can work with it. Gianpaolo, congratulations. We'll be in touch with you as to how we can get this thing out to you. And when you do start doing that and using it with Home Assistant, please document it on the Electromaker Project Hub. I'm sure many other people will be interested how you could take something like this box, as I mentioned on the last show when I talked about it, a dev kit which is almost a finished product in and of itself, and integrate it with a DIY Home Assistant setup. So yeah, please do that. But now, it is time to move on to our current product of the week, the Seedstudio round display. So the Seedstudio round display is targeted somewhat towards wearables, but it's something that can work in a variety of different settings. But as Robin points out in the very start of this product of the week video, which I absolutely suggest you go and watch as always, Robin gives a really good high-level overview of all of the features and different ways you could use it. He points out in the cold open, he holds it up next to his Apple Watch and says that people have been saying that the display is too big, but putting it right next to his watch, it is the same depth and width as the Apple Watch face, which is something that makes it actually a perfect shoe-in for working with wearables. Now, of of course, you have to add things like a battery and a strap. You're going to add a little bit of extra size onto it, but if you're prototyping a wearable, this is actually going to be really good for that alone, even if it was just a display, but there's a lot more to it than that. So it is a round display, it is a touchscreen, and it is quite a bright touchscreen by all accounts. Robin was mentioning to me when I saw him recently that it was actually, it surprised him how decent the screen was for the price, given that this thing is only $18. But there's a few other things that are really nice touches to this as well. Now, obviously, this is something that's going to work nicely with the entire Seedstudio Xiao range. They're very small development boards, ideal for wearables, and this can just slot directly onto a Xiao if you have the pins on the Xiao. But it has a few extra features on it that are really nice too. It has a battery holder for a real-time clock, which allows you to simply put a battery in and you've got a real-time clock, which is going to be handy if you're trying to have a wearable that can keep its own time between connections to the internet or via Bluetooth or however you choose to do it. It has expandable memory via a TF card slot, so up to 32 gigabytes of fat memory, ideal for projects needing additional storage or data for data or multimedia. And it also allows you to connect batteries to it, as previously mentioned, and has a battery charging circuit. Now, those are just a few things, but they're all the things you need for some kind of wearable device. However, it probably would feature as a quite nice little smart home display as well. It occurred to me that if you were to put all the things that you would put into a wearable into, say, a little thing with a magnet on the back, if you used a low power enough mode that it only woke up when you tapped the screen, for example, you could have something on your fridge that was stuck to the fridge that you tap, and it could give you whatever information you need to know about it. You could have your shopping list that connects to Google Keep, and then you have that on your phone, and so you can just see what you need visually. There's a few different ways you could actually work with it. And of course, you still have a Seedstudio Xiao or whatever board you decide to connect to it underneath it, so you can add other things to it, like extra buttons, extra sliders, extra dials, anything that you would need for it. Usually I'd probably go into a little bit more detail as to different ways you could use it or different things you might want to use it for, but honestly I feel like this is one of the ones that somewhat speaks for itself. However, if you do want a lot more details on it, of course, I highly recommend going and watching the video from Robin, where they'll take you through every single step of why you might want one. And of course, there is an opportunity for you to get one for free, because as always, we will be giving one of these away. Yes, if you click on the link just here in the blog article, or click on the title of the video, or just go to our YouTube channel and find the video, underneath there is a pinned comment that will tell you how to enter the competition. Win a Seedstudio round display for Xiao. Tell us in the comments below what you would make with the display and use the hashtag Seed. And note that Seed has 3 E's in it. Seed. A winner will be selected on the 3rd of December 2024. This competition has already been running for a little while. We announced it on social media. Of course, we announced it in the video itself. But of course, you do now still have a little bit more time to enter it as well. Just a quick reminder, all of our competition winners are chosen at random, but you do have to say what you would make if you won it, because that's just something that I really like to read. I love reading people's ideas for what they would make with the things that are featured on the Product of the Week show. And if you would like to, as I mentioned, watch the video, you can watch it on YouTube or check out the blog post, and it is of course available from the Electromaker store. Now would be the perfect moment to remind you that Electromaker does not run ads on its YouTube videos. If you see that, that's YouTube doing it, but we don't monetize them. None of that goes to us. This is our monetization. So if you like this product and you enter the giveaway and maybe don't win it but still want one, if you buy it from Electromaker, that helps us out immensely. We do ship worldwide, and if you have any questions about it, do get in touch with the store. But yes, that is it. That is the Seedstudio round display. That is our product of the week. I would love to know what you think of this one, but of course, if you just want to head straight to this video and enter the contest, do that too, as long as you tell me what you'd make with it. It is time for a quick edition of Funding Website Things, where we look at things on funding websites, but we usually look at crowd supply because it's essentially the Kickstarter of awesome embedded devices, and they're good people. But this time round, before we go to the page, I want to say once again how happy it makes me when a project comes along that takes something that, when you think about it, is so obvious, why haven't we been doing that, but then does it, and does it in a wonderful way. See, a lot of devices have SD card slots, and an SD card just passes data to the host, right? And if it is a normal SD card, it will be recognized as such, and it can use it as storage and all that kind of stuff. But if you have something that can plug into something else and pass data back and forward through it, why don't you put some circuitry on the SD card that turns it into a development board? Well, that's exactly what is happening here. Signaloid C0 Micro SD is a programmable FPGA system on module in a tiny little micro SD form factor that can plug into any micro SD port or any SD port with an adapter, and works in a variety of different ways. The idea alone I find so compelling. Now, the page does such a wonderful job of showing the multiple ways that this could be used. I'm going to sort of gloss over that, but the video alone will show you a few different ways you can work with it. But in short, this allows you to add a FPGA or a RISC-V coprocessor of some kind to anything that has a micro SD slot. And one of the reasons that can be the case is because of the way that it works. If you do plug it into a device and it realizes it has a micro SD host on it, it will act in a certain way. If it does not find that, it will simply dump the user bit stream that you have put on it out through the micro SD port, allowing it to be worked on in a different way. So even if you have something that doesn't necessarily work as a traditional micro USB host, you can still use this in your project. At least I think that's the case. We're at the limit of my understanding here. Whenever there's anything to do with FPGAs, I very quickly lose. I hit my ceiling very quickly, put it that way. But it says here, you can either use it as a hot pluggable FPGA module or use it as a hot pluggable Signaloid C0 RISC-V coprocessor module. As it says, once powered on, the built-in bootloader will check if the device has been connected to an SD host, and if not, will load the latest custom user bitstream. So I did remember that correctly. There's a couple of different ways you can get a hold of one of these today. If you would like to find out more about the project, I highly recommend coming and taking a look at very least the video here. It's only 1 minute and 43 seconds long and takes you through everything you need to know. And there is a fully detailed blog post here. In terms of their funding goal, they have absolutely smashed it. They were only looking for $2,500 and have made $12,800 and counting. But the purchasing options are also quite interesting. So the standalone Signaloid C0 micro SD board is $45, and as previously mentioned, if you got this, you could start working with it straight away. You just need a micro SD slot of some kind, which again, still blowing my mind slightly. But if you've been working with Compute Module 4s at all, they have a carrier board as well for it. That kit is $180, but it includes one of the micro SD boards here as well. So you're sort of getting everything in one package, which is going to be useful for people who have already been working with the CM4 form factor. If you are interested in finding out more, I highly recommend taking a read through the page. The idea alone is something that I find so compelling that I am very tempted to get a hold of one of these, because there's nothing more portable than this in terms of having something to plug in and get started learning how to do a little bit of FPGA programming. It is something that I am woefully inadequate with, and I would really like to at least have some rudimentary knowledge, even if it's a very basic knowledge of, which is why I am probably going to do my usual thing of buying one of these things, even though I don't have time really to work with it right now. The point is, this is small enough to fit in the sleeve of my laptop case, slot into the SD reader on my laptop, and if I have a train journey coming up, of which I have several, it might be the perfect time to do a little bit of that. But yes, if you're interested in finding out more, there will be a link, as always, in the description of this video. We are going to briefly stop over at Hackaday to look at this article from Lewin Day about a project by someone called Anna. The maker of the project is, the project is linked directly in the first paragraph of the Hackaday article, but I would recommend reading the article because it does give a nice breakdown of what this is. And it is so simple, but so elegant, because analog displays are really fun. It's just a really nice way of looking at stuff, you know, an actual physical display that moves backwards and forwards depending on what you're measuring. They're really nice for sound as well. There's something very satisfying about seeing decibel meters jump up and down. And are they the most accurate things in the world to the point many decibels? I'm still in sound world of decimals. Not really, but that doesn't matter. They don't need to be. However, traditionally, each dial sort of does one thing, or maybe does a couple of things over different magnitudes. But by putting an e-ink display behind a mechanical dial, you get something that can measure a bunch of different things, and you can cycle through them and change what the dial itself does. And that's what is here. This is essentially an ESP32 development kit with an e-ink screen with a mechanical dial in front of it, and I don't need to explain it much more than that, I don't think. The idea is elegant and simple in and of itself. So I'm going to leave the Hackaday article in the description because that's how I found it, but you can jump through to Anna's page here, which has the repository here and also the full write-up of how it came together. And I really like the aesthetics of it as well. I really like the way it looks. I really like this print and the painting over the top of it. It's just, yeah, everything about it really appeals to me. And of course, you can get the software and hardware design that they used as well. So yeah, very short segment there because there's not all that much to say about it other than this is very cool and I cannot believe I didn't think of it before. Now, a little while ago, you may remember that we had an interview with Zach Supala, who is the CEO of a company called Particle. Now, a very quick catch-up if you're new to Particle. They are a full stack IoT company, I think is probably the fairest way of putting it, because they have an online cloud system for fleet management and for doing pretty much anything you want to, talking to, logging and getting data and even programming remotely IoT devices, but they also sell a bunch of their own hardware as well. At the time we talked to Zach, they were just in the process of getting ready to release the Tachyon, their 5G SBC, which uses Android hardware with mainline Linux support, which I think is the first time that's ever happened, but don't quote me on that, I might be wrong. But what Particle are mostly known for in terms of hardware historically is MCU-based things, which are all fitted with different forms of connectivity. I had too many F's and T's in that sentence. So the holiday sale focuses on a few of these boards, and there's a few things I wanted to sort of draw attention to, the Photon 2 being one of them, because I had a Particle Photon a while ago, before I really understood the full scale of what Particle were doing. And the Photon 2 is only $9, which is wild, because it's an ARM Cortex-M33, I believe, the CPU. Which is, a relatively powerful Cortex-M33, dual-band Wi-Fi, BLE 5.3 support, and a bunch of memory and flash. But again, you're getting something that will work with the Particle Cloud right out of the box. And the Particle Cloud is something they've been working on for a decade. During the interview, I remember Zach saying it's a sort of dangerous thing to try and do everything, but they've had that time to flesh out all the different parts of their service that need to work perfectly. And they have hundreds of thousands of clients, some of which are working on very critical engineering projects where they really need to have reliable hardware and software support. And that's who they've been targeting for a while. So while there are many companies that do custom hardware and their own custom cloud stuff, Particle really do have that sort of longevity to it. Tenure, I think, is the word. I also want to point out that the Boron LTE-M is only $29 at the minute. This is an LTE-M board, so this gives you cellular IoT connectivity in a handy development board form factor, so you can start working on things, again, which will work straight out of the box with the Particle Cloud, as you would expect. And they also have the M-SOM LTE Cat 1, 2G, 3G, and Wi-Fi, which is an M2 slotted device, which will give you cellular and Wi-Fi in one package, and this is only $35 as well. When Particle reached out to ask if we wanted to cover their holiday sale, we were more than happy to, because frankly I think Particle are doing really cool things. And while I am not necessarily directly their target audience, if I was to be setting out for any kind of project that would need to be easily prototyped and then scaled massively and in a really trustworthy situation, I'd be pretty convinced to use Particle just from that conversation I had with Zach. But yeah, if you're interested, check it out for yourself. I'll be leaving a link to their holiday sale in the description of the video, along with a link to that interview with Zach, and you can have a look at it and see what you think as well. That has been our show for this week. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for all the continued support you give us. And apologies, there was a little bit of a gap between shows, as I mentioned at the start of the show. Life somewhat gets on top of me in conference season, but yes, I'm very glad to be back. I hope that the sound quality for this show was okay. As I mentioned in the middle of the show, I have a guest in the room, and a hedgehog in a pile of leaves can make a surprisingly large amount of sound. He is only a temporary visitor, and I will be very sad to see him go when he does. But yes, that is all for this week. As always, thank you for everyone that goes to the Electromaker store to buy their things, electromaker.io/shop. That supports us financially and directly financially. If you would like to join our Discord server, it is a very friendly place. There's a link to it under this video. But I think that is it for now. I hope you have a fun, safe, and creative week, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Bye.